If you're a service provider that's great at what you do, but the proposal process keeps blocking you from government contracts, this is for you. Most businesses lose even before the evaluator gets to their pricing because their proposal is confusing, incomplete, or just doesn't show exactly how they would perform the work. In this video, I'm breaking down the exact structure of a winning proposal, how to read a solicitation, how to match your business to the scope of work, how to build a clear approach, and how to price with confidence so you stop underbidding. So stay with me, because by the end, you'll know how to package your proposal in a way that's easy to score, hard to reject, and position you as the obvious choice. So if you're new to my channel, welcome. I know it's been a minute since we've been together. I'm Felicia, and I help established service businesses win government contracts. I've secured over 50 million in federal contracts. I've helped clients win over 100 million in government contracts. And today I'm breaking down how to create proposals that get scored, noticed, and awarded. Here's the thing, I've helped service businesses win contracts from 150,000 to over 750,000. So you'll see exactly what works and how to turn your proposal into a winning contract. So let's start with what most people skip, and that's understanding the requirements. So you first want to know, what exactly is the agency buying? All agencies do not purchase the same things. That's why it's important for you to know who is buying what you're putting out there. The service you provide, who is out there looking for that? You can check your agency's websites. You can check the forecast, which I highly suggest you do that one. And you can also speak to contracting officers, purchasing agents directly to see what they have coming down the pipeline, what type of products and services do they purchase. The second thing is, what does the outcome look like? What do they want? Here's the deal. At the end of the day, the agency, your customer or client, has a problem. And they want to know, how do you plan to solve that problem for them? How will you get them to a solution? The next thing you must understand is your mandatory items versus your optional items. So within your requirements, you're going to find that they're going to have certain things that are required as far as scope of work, what they want to see. And then there also, sometimes they may have some optional items. Here's what I suggest. Definitely speak to the mandatory items that they're looking for. You want to make sure you include that in your proposal, in your pricing, but I wouldn't leave out the optional things either. Here's the reason why. If you put the optional things in there and they decide they want those things as well, you've already included it in your proposal. You've already priced it out. So only thing they have to do at that point is a change order to include those new optional items. Because here's the other thing. If they're not included in your proposal and they decide, you know what, we needed this extra XYZ, or we want to add on to this, and it's not in your proposal, so then they may have to put the entire thing back out on the streets to then get proposals for that piece. But why not already include it into your proposal? All right. So it allows for you to then get extra work if that's the case, but you've also already priced it out and they know that you're interested and you can do that work. And so you're kind of doing them a favor in that regard as well. So if they're putting it in there as an option, they're thinking about it. So don't leave out the options. Now, you won't include it as if it's part of the proposal, it's part of the package, in that if they award it to you, those optional items are automatically included. You're just including them as optional line items. And then there are some non-negotiables that they'll have in the requirements that if you skip those, you're out. They will automatically disqualify you. So you want to make sure you're addressing and including whatever non-negotiables that they have within their solicitation. And those are things that are actually required. So that's why it's important that you know how to read, analyze, and break down a solicitation. It's not just like reading a book and, okay, what did I learn from this? No, you have to be able to read it, decipher, and pull out those requirements, those non-negotiables. And then also there's always some things that may be optional or that you can include, but it's not a must. Okay. So you got to be able to decipher that. And all the time it's not going to say you must include this. You have to be able to read the wording, read between the lines, and analyze and understand what they're asking for. All right, so the second thing is, let's get down to breaking down the solicitation. So here are, I want to share with you 4 key areas that you want to focus on. I'm moving my camera, sorry. 4 key areas you want to focus on when you're breaking down the solicitation. Now, within my Prime Ready Accelerator, and even inside my Bid to Win Bootcamp, I talk about breaking down a solicitation and key areas that you need to focus on, but also give you a quick checklist, your bid, go, no-go formula that you can quickly decipher and decide if an opportunity is something you want to pursue. And so when you're looking at the solicitation, you want to make sure you look at these key areas in the beginning just to determine if this is something you want to pursue versus taking days or weeks putting it together and then realize you get to a section, it's like, oh, I can't do that. I don't meet that requirement. So let's dive in. So the first thing you want to look at is your technical approach. And these are not in any specific order here, okay? So you want to look at your technical approach. How will you perform the day-to-day? Remember, taking them from the problem to the solution. And this is where most people fail, within that technical approach. So you want to make sure your technical approach is tight. And here's the thing. You may know in your mind, in your head, how that will flow, but you have to be able to get it out your head and onto paper to where someone else can read and understand how that flow will go and how it makes sense to take them from that problem to the solution. Okay, because they're not going to be in your head, right? They're not going to read it in your head. You're not going to tell them verbally how you're going to do it. You're going to have to write it within your proposal. So you want to make sure that part is tight. You want to make sure your plan matches the scope. Okay, that has to be tight, because if it doesn't match the scope, they're going to figure you don't know what you're talking about. Also, they're looking for you to remove any risk for them in hiring or awarding the contract to you. So again, all of that is wrapped in your technical proposal and showing them that you know what you're doing. Like, this is not your first rodeo. Now, if you don't know, I did use the word scope of work. The scope of work is basically the work that you will perform. Is what they're asking of you. This is what we want you to do, the scope of work. Now, keep in mind, sometimes that scope of work may not be laid out. They may just give you an end result that they want, and you're going to have to write the entire scope, the technical proposal on how you will perform that. So that's why it goes back to you knowing how to do what you do when you're raising your hand and saying, hey, select me for this contract, because I know what I'm doing. I know how to do this work. I know how to get you to the end result. Now, you also see a section that may say deliverables. This is what you will provide. What results will you produce for them? Okay. It could be deliverables. You're going to pay the parking lot. You're going to add a extra room that's I don't know, 20 by 30 with 3 windows, whatever, right? Deliverables. They also will provide submission instructions. Now, this is another place where a lot of people fall off, unfortunately, but it's about paying attention to details. And basically, your submission instructions is telling you how you need to submit your information to be considered for that particular opportunity. So you want to know the what, the who, the when, and the how. We already know the why. So what all do you need to submit? You want to be looking for that, and they're going to lay it out for you. Who do you need to submit it to? They will provide that information as well. When does it need to be submitted? They're going to provide you with a date and a time and a time zone. Don't skip the time zone, because you may be in a different time zone than which they are. And so they're going to put it in their time zone. So here's the thing. If you're in California, they're in Florida. When they say 2 o'clock, 2 o'clock in Florida is a different time in California. 2 o'clock in California is a different time in Florida. So you may have to convert the time zone to your time zone to assure that you submit it on time. My thing is, and usually it's in the afternoon sometimes. So my thing is, at least by that morning, I would submit. Back in the day, we would even do it the day before, because we had to fax things back then. Can you believe that? Well, nowadays, a lot of things are submitted via email, which is great. Okay. And then the how. So how are you going to submit it? And nowadays, the how is usually via email. Okay. You may still have cases where they say you can mail it. But if that was an option for me, I'm probably going to FedEx it and make sure it gets there a day early so that we have no issues, no problems, and I can track when they received it, right? Because you'll get a stamp and a time of when it was delivered. You definitely want that. Okay, so the last thing I want to cover here in this section is the evaluators criteria. So this is very, very important. And this is how they're going to score you to determine if you're the awardee. So you want to make sure you're compliant with the request. Whatever they're asking for, they're going to make sure that you submitted those things. Some of the things they're going to be looking for and that they may score you on, and this is just general. Each opportunity is different. Sometimes they will tell you how they're going to score you and the percentage of each item and what it will weigh, and sometimes they will not. So you just want to make sure you hit all the points, okay? So they're going to look at past performance. And so you want to make sure whatever past performance you provide to them, that it aligns with the type of opportunity that you're bidding. Because ultimately you want to show them that, hey, I've done this type of work before. I have experience in doing this. So again, with that, you're mitigating risk for them. They're going to want to see that you have money to start the project, okay? So that may be they require a bank statement or your financials, okay? So with that being said, I usually say, and in my trainings, I tell my clients, you want to make sure you're able to float the project until it can float itself. Whether that's you're getting paid, maybe your first invoice will go out in 30 days. And if you have net 15, that means you got to float it for 45 days until you receive that first payment. Okay. Make sure you include any required documentation. And again, they'll tell you the required documentation. Some of the things they're going to look for is making sure key personnel, you have their resumes included. Why? Because they want to see that whoever you're going to have as key personnel, meaning they're going to be working on this project, that they have experience doing this type of work, whether they're, your PM, your superintendent, what do they call it? Contract administrator, I think. What do they call it? Project coordinator. That's what we used to call them. Project coordinator. Okay. And whatever the name may be, but they're doing the paperwork. Any certifications you have, especially if it was a set aside opportunity, for example, for a woman-owned small business, then you want to make sure you include that certification. And then if licenses are required, or if just your general work or what you do requires a particular type of license, you want to make sure you include that. Like if you're a GC, you can include that license. If you have a clearance, you can include that. So whatever licenses or certifications that you may have that pertains to the project and what you're doing, make sure you include those as well. And then the last thing, please double check for this. Make sure you have the necessary signatures and where they need to go. 9 times out of 10, you're signing in more than one place. So make sure you go back through and sign everywhere you need to sign and date where you need to date, meaning put the date, okay? And so focusing on these things, making sure you include them in your proposal keeps them from guessing. You don't want them guessing. You want them to evaluate you on the facts and the facts that you've presented, because when you present those facts, you're presenting your company, right? And ultimately, hopefully, you're putting your best foot forward. So you want them to base their decision on the facts that you provided. The third thing you want to do is match your business to the work. Looking at what part of the scope can you perform and the things that you cannot. And then with the things that you cannot, how do you plan to fill those gaps? Will you use subcontractors, or who will you use to fill those gaps? And then you want to look at the past performance, making sure it's aligned again with the scope of work. You want to showcase the projects that matches with that. Also, let's say they ask for 3 past performance projects, and you have 2 that's within that scope of work, but you also have another one that you've done with their agency before. I would include that one. Or you have the 2 that you've done within your scope of work and maybe one that you've done with another agency. I would include that. Okay. So that's how I would do that to get to my 3. Again, you just want to make sure you're providing the past performance that one aligns with the project scope of work, and then with the agency directly, or with that sector of the market directly. And then you want to look at your resources, showcasing the resources and the equipment that may be needed to perform the project, and that you have those things, right? Either you already have the equipment or you have the resources to get the equipment, whether you're going to buy it, rent it, lease it, whatever that looks like. You want to let them know that you're able and you have the equipment needed. And then also, I like to highlight the team members that's going to play an important role and have the experience that associates with that project, and whether it's the front office or the back office, all the key personnel is accounted for and showcased as well, because those things will strengthen your proposal and again give them the warm and fuzzy, mitigating risk for them. And actually, this part here we covered last week in my Bid to Win program. Here's the thing. Here's the problem. This is where most companies overpromise or under-explain. So you see how I gave you some things where here's what I would include, but here's also what I would include and why. Okay, so you just want to make sure you're covering all your bases. You don't want them to have to guess about anything. And here's the thing, with over 50 million in contracts won and all the clients I have helped all over the United States win contracts, I know what it takes to succeed. So I want you to drop the word, give me the guide in the comments, and then I'll send over to you my 5 steps to your 6-figure contract or beyond with government contracts. And here's the thing, what we teach here on this channel, it not only works for government contracts, but it works for corporate contracts as well as private sector contracts. So once you get to the nitty gritty and contracting, putting together a proposal, it's universal. So let's get back into it. Stick with me. I have 4 more things I want to cover with you. So the 4th thing is build your approach to doing the work. You want to make sure you plan to execute the scope, your method, your processes, your timeline, right? If it's a project that's going to be going on for some time, you're going to have schedules that you're going to have to include, milestones that you're going to have in there, risk management and communication. How will you handle these things? Making sure your approach is locked in with these things not only tells them that you're qualified, but you're reliable. And that's a big thing that they're looking for, especially when you get into these longer term contracts, these multiple year contracts, and these $1 million contracts. They need to know that you're reliable. Okay, so the fifth thing we want to get into is pricing with confidence. Here's another area that a lot of people struggle. Now, not that they can't price, because you can put some numbers together, but when they get to the end of the project, a lot of times the profit margin that they thought they would have is gone. And we don't want that. So the first thing is you want to make sure you're bidding numbers that actually reflect the actual work and cost. Now, inside my program, my Prime Ready Accelerator, which next cohort is in January, but inside there, we have a section where we focus specifically on pricing. I give you the complete formulas to make sure you're pricing competitively, but also profitably. And here's the thing, you have to know how to put your numbers together. I'm talking about your direct cost, your indirect cost. And just so you know, direct cost is the cost associated to doing the work, but you're also going to have some indirect costs that you should be adding into the project as well. And those are some of your overhead costs, like the cost of running your business, and you associate a portion of that to the project. And I show you how to break that down as far as percentages and everything, and how to determine what that percentage is inside my program with the formulas and everything right there for you. And you just plug your number in and it gives you the result. Oh, and also with your indirect costs, another thing that is in there is some of your admin costs. So in order to get to those numbers, you have to be tracking your numbers. Okay. So the next thing is how to price for profit. And I'm not talking about just to win, right? We want a profit. We want some extra money at the end, right? That's how businesses stay in business. Because if you're just pricing to break even, there's nothing extra. How will your business grow? You can't forget your margins for profit or your markup. You also need to understand your labor, your materials, your overhead, and your admin. Okay? All of those numbers, if you're job costing, you can easily pull those numbers out from your accounting system and then plug the numbers into your pricing spreadsheet or your pricing software. Here's what I suggest. Track your numbers on a monthly basis, and any accounting software will help you with that. Not something I suggest you do on your own unless that's your background, but as you're growing, my established small businesses, I'm sure you guys are not doing this on your own, but this is some information that you can definitely reach out to your accountant, your bookkeeper, and get those numbers from them or those financials when you need to submit those. Now, let's back up to, I mentioned this earlier, the next thing is the cash flow. Can you float the project until you get paid? Do you have enough money in the bank? Access to capital, credit cards. How do you plan to cover the costs on a monthly basis for the first month? At the very least is what they're looking at, or until they know they would be paying you your first payment. So they're going to look at that and see if you have the resources to sustain until you start getting paid on the project. Now, keep in mind, depending on the project, depending on the terms, depending on how long the project is, that first payment may not hit for 30 to 60 days. So you want to make sure you can float the project until then. And this is where small businesses get stuck. Can you relate? Let me know in the comment. Just put a yes if you can relate to that. Next thing is how to structure your proposal like a pro. Here's the thing. You want to make sure is that you break it down into sections that the evaluator expects, okay? And again, they're going to tell you how to put the proposal together, like the order they want things in. And just keep it in the same order that they've requested, please. That way it makes it easy for them to find things, okay? So one of the things is your executive summary, okay? This is where you get to showcase your company. Tell them a little bit about your company, who you are, meaning what type of work you perform. You can talk about your past experience. contracts you've been awarded, and not just listing them, but you're going to give them an overall, just a brief about your company. And basically in there, you're telling them why you're a good fit for this particular opportunity. And here's the thing, this is something that you can have pre-written that you could plug into the proposal when you need it, especially if you're not all over the place and you're focused and you know your core areas and scope of work that you focus on. Next thing is your technical approach. And we covered this earlier. And so remember, this will be written to your scope of work, which means in most cases, it will change for every opportunity, because I haven't seen an opportunity where the scope of work remains the same all the time. It's usually some variation thereof. So you'll always be tweaking or just writing that scope of work from scratch, the technical approach, okay? And then also they're going to look at your management approach. How do you plan to manage the project? So it's not just about performing the work. Most people can do that. Where most people fall down is managing the project. Okay. And so they want to make sure that you are capable of managing the project. Right? So that you can manage the project in the field, but you can also manage the back office, the paperwork, right? Making sure you're staying compliant, that you're invoicing, that you're paying your subcontractors, and that, you know how to manage your money flow. And so here's the thing I always say, don't let your back office prevent the success in your front office. That's your management approach. And I'm probably sure this is probably one of the reasons people join my program. They know how to do the work. It's the paperwork. That's the part and the area that they struggle. The next thing is your staffing plan. How many people will you have? How will you schedule the people? And especially on projects where you have staggered things that have to be done, meaning like this one thing has to be done before you can start on the next thing. But then you also have some things that you can overlap and doing them at the same time. So you have to create a plan and show them how you plan to staff and have people in there working and get to the finish line by the due date. Now, and also another thing they'll give you is, because you could say, well, we'll have some people come in at 8 and then we'll have some people come in after hours, but you may only have access to the location during normal office hours, or only after hours up until 10 o'clock at night, or midnight or something like that. So you have to pay attention to that and then schedule your staff accordingly. Another thing is the past performance. We talked about that earlier. And so here's the thing. Here's what I would do. I would create a list of all the past performance that I have. Okay. From projects in the past, I would put down within each one some key information, the type of project, if you have a name for the project, the agency, whoever the client was, where it was located, the project type, the project size, how long the project was, and then also the contact information for someone that you could contact there as a reference if you needed it. Then I would take those, save them into a folder digitally, and then when you need it, and then remember we said type of project, that way you can kind of go through them, and depending on how you save it, you could do a search and find the ones that matches the particular scope of work or project size or agency, to include it as a part of your past performance for the particular opportunity that you're bidding. All right, so now pricing. So here's the thing with pricing. We talked about coming up with the number, but within your proposal, they may ask you to give them the price. They just want the price. That's it. So when they ask for that, you want to make sure when you give them that number that that is your total cost, that you've already included the cost, your markup, as well as your profit margin. So the total cost, not the cost, but the total cost. There's a difference. They may just ask for that. And then sometimes they will ask for it by line items, and that's where you're going to break it out. Now, here's the thing. If you did your pricing and then you put your markup at the end, and then you put your profit margin at the end of the numbers, and then they say, hey, break it down and give it to me by line item, and you just give them the line item, then you forgot the markup and the profit margin. So what I like to do, and this is how I show my clients in my program and how we break it down within our spreadsheets, is when we have various line items, we put the markup and the profit margin with each line item and come up with a total that way, so that if we have to break it out by line item, we have it with those markup and profit margins, or we give them a total number. And then they come back and they say, you know what, this part, we want to take out the contract. And so then you pull that part out, or they say, add this in, or we want more of this particular thing. And they look at the line item that you gave them. Well, on that piece, you're not making anything, like it's bare bone cost. And that's it, because you forgot to do it by line item. So even though if they ask for the total number and that's all you give them is like one number, just make sure your line items, each line item includes the markup and the profit margin. And no worries, either way, if that's confusing for you, you don't know how to do that inside my Accelerator, I show you how to do that. So don't worry about it. And then also you want to make sure you include the required forms. Now, the required forms, they'll provide them to you. So you just want to make sure that you include those when you submit your proposal, as well as making sure you sign all the documents that need to be signed. I see when I go through some of my clients' proposals where they've included page 3, but they forgot page 2. So you want to make sure you go through your document before you submit it, and make sure if it's 3 pages, all 3 pages are there, okay? So here's where most people fail. Missing required documents, not following the exact order, weak explanations on how they will perform, and sloppy formatting or incomplete attachments. All right, so we got one more thing to cover, and this is your submittal before we wrap it up. So I want to talk about the mechanics of that, the deadlines, questions, and your submittal. So you may need to ask for clarifying questions. That's cool. Within your solicitation, they're going to tell you that they have a question and answer period. So that means you need to go through that solicitation, break it down, pull out the requirements, analyze it, and then formulate any questions that you have that will prevent you from writing the technical proposal, right? Understanding the scope of work, as well as submitting whatever they're asking for, because sometimes they can leave out a form as well. So you just want to make sure you go through it and make sure you ask any questions that you have within the question and answer time, because after that, there's no more questions. And so if it's a pertinent question that you need an answer to so that you can price correctly, you want to make sure you ask those questions. Now, here's what happens at the deadline. So here's the deadline. You have a deadline of when the proposals need to be submitted by. So once they're received, they're going to receive them in. Make sure you submitted it on time. They're going to go through, make sure you submitted everything that was required. And then depending on how they are evaluating and scoring, they may go by best value, or they could go by price. So either way, you want to make sure you showcase both. We talked about how to submit your packet. And my thing is just make sure you submit everything and then label it to, some type of way to where they know what it is. Make sure you include your company name. You can include the solicitation number. That way they know who it belongs to and what it's for. Okay. And then also avoid last minute mistakes. Last minute mistakes happen when you're rushing. So over time, you will figure out how long it takes you to put together a proposal. Okay. And in most cases, when you get into those complex proposals, it could take you a couple weeks. Not to mention you're having to source numbers, maybe from subcontractors or suppliers. And so you have to give them time to get their numbers back to you. And then you have to include their numbers within your numbers to come up with your final number. So you need time to do all of that. And so you want to make sure you give yourself enough time versus having to rush and put everything together. Okay, I know that was a lot, but and now you have how to package your proposal, what to include in it, how to read the solicitation, what key areas you need to focus on within your proposal, what key areas you need to focus on, key areas in pricing that you need to focus on, and numbers you need to make sure you include. So I think you have a clear picture now of how you can complete a proposal and be competitive. Would you agree? Give me a thumbs up if you agree. Okay. So here's the thing. Don't sit on this information. You can go back and re-watch this and create you a checklist that you can use, take it and then tweak it to add in any other variations that you need to add to make it your own, and have a checklist that you can use as you're putting together your proposals. So here's what I challenge you to do. Go pull a solicitation now and then practice breaking down that solicitation to that particular scope, just like I showed you, and just see how that goes. And then you could definitely, come back and see about how would you price it, right? And then once it's awarded, or if it's been awarded already, you can see if you were competitive. Now, if you want a deeper dive into this, some help, some templates to make things easier, or real examples modeled, then make sure you check out my program. I have a course, Be It to Win, and then I also have my Prime Ready Accelerator with the next cohort coming up in January. You can check that out. But here's what I want you to do. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and also how can I help you win contracts. All right, and remember, you're just one contract away. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye for now.